All right, everyone. Quick question for you. How much do you think about regret in your life? Meaning, how many times have you gotten to a certain stage of your life and you've looked back and you wish you would have done something differently? It could be within a relationship, it could be maybe a job. As you may or may not know, in my life, my parents, I lost both of my parents at very early ages in their lives. My mom hadn't turned 50 yet, and my dad was right before he turned 65. And so the regret piece of life is something that's I'm super hyper conscious aware of, meaning I'm always trying to think of and not have regret with anything that's going on in my life. The woulda, coulda, shouldas is that's how I phrase it, right? I don't want to have any of those as I continue to move on in my life because I feel like my parents didn't probably do as much as they would have liked to have, obviously. I think that they probably would have made some different decisions in their life had they known obviously the outcome, what was ahead for them in their life. And so I'm trying to be that way, not as that's where it's a little bit of a challenge because it makes me have the tendency of looking at life a little bit more pessimistic, right? So I'm trying to spin that though and be a little bit more optimistic, but make sure that I don't get to the end whenever my end is and have some regret looking backwards. Greg had a quote, and this actually comes from the show The Office. So, and he's got a quote that came from one of the characters within that show that you might be familiar with, but it kind of goes along with this idea of having those woulda, coulda, shouldas in your life and dealing with some regret. And that's kind of what we want to discuss here today on the Rich Mind podcast. We greatly appreciate you showing up and being here today. And I think this will be a fun conversation. Maybe it'll reflect some things back into your life. Maybe it'll help you make some different decisions moving forward. And just being aware of it, I think, is the biggest challenge and the biggest difference that can really impact you, your surroundings, just your family, and all the different things that are going on in your life. So, Greg, add the context here. I know I'm familiar because you shared it with me. I didn't exactly see the episode, but tell us a little bit more about where this came from. You brought this one to me, and I think that's going to be a fun conversation. Tell me a little bit more.
Hopefully we have some Office fans out there. But even if you're not an Office fan, like Randy said, the message is the most important thing. It's not the fact that it came from Hollywood or, Pam Beesly was the character, but it was just basically her looking back on her experience as the character in the documentary of The Office. And it kind of goes along with regret, but I'm just going to kind of jump into it because then we can dive into a little bit. It's a little bit of a longer quote, so bear with me. So Pam was basically the receptionist at the office, just to kind of set it up a little bit. So her quote was, "I didn't watch the whole documentary. After a few episodes, it was too painful. I kept wanting to scream at Pam. It took me so long to do so many important things. It's just hard to accept that I spent so many years being less happy than I could have been. Jim was 5 feet away from my desk, and it took me 4 years to get to him. It'd be great if people saw this documentary and learned from my mistakes. Not that I'm a tragic person. I'm really happy now, but it would just make my heart soar if someone out there saw this and she said to herself, be strong, trust yourself, love yourself, conquer your fears, just go after what you want and act fast because life just isn't that long." Pam Beesly Helper. That's the quote.
Love that. Love that. So once again, being hyper aware of that in my own life. And so I just want to share it and, there again, reflect that onto you listening to us here today. And that's where this dialogue is going to go back and forth is where is it that you're playing small? That's what I keep saying, even for myself. Sometimes in my life, I try to protect myself from expanding into a bigger, better version of myself because I'm trying to play small and I'm trying to actively not do that based almost just like what you just said in that quote. Jim, you made reference of Jim in that quote, and Jim was the person she ended up marrying, I believe, in the episode in the show itself.
Mm-hmm.
So it was her soulmate, I guess, right? Her
Yep.
future husband, and she chose or wasn't as active pursuing that as she could have been, should have been, and she's realizing it and reflecting on that in the past. So that would be kind of where I would like to start the conversation is where in your life are you not pursuing this version of yourself that you desire to be? I ask the question all the time as far as what is it that you truly want? And I understand that that is a very difficult question to ask. But is there a job that you're working in, or is there a relationship that you're hanging on to, or is there a relationship that you desire to have, or a position, or anything that you're striving to have or to eliminate that you're hanging on to because of this fear of uncertainty of, so there again, it's just, I want to inspire you to not have that regret looking backwards as much as you possibly can. And that's where I love how you brought this quote into it. So what areas of life are that for you? And think about that as we have this conversation here today. But yeah, I'm super glad you brought that up. It's very important to think through. It's tough, it's challenging, but it's also a big part of mindset and achievement and moving forward, right? Understanding where you're at and not letting that regret kind of hold you back into a smaller version of yourself.
Yeah, I agree, man. I mean, regret, like we talk about, we don't want to live in the past, but we also want to, like she said, just learn from your mistakes, but more importantly, learn from other people's mistakes, right? I mean, we all make mistakes and they're all out there in the public, especially movie stars, sports people, all these famous people, they make mistakes left and right, money mistakes, marital mistakes, relationships. And we can learn from them every day just by watching what they do and like, oh, I don't want to do that. That looks horrible to get divorced 3 times in my lifetime. I'm not signing up for that. And it's just more of, for me, I think it's more of like indecisiveness and procrastination that is, like you said, kind of keeping me small, or at least small in my own version of whatever, that looks like for me. And the other day I was listening to a podcast kind of relating to this, but it was kind of have that invincible factor, like we're going to live forever. And, Pam even said in her quote, life just isn't that long. And listening to this other podcast, it kind of hit me really kind of square between the eyes, where they said something like, death happens to other people. Illnesses happen to other people, but not me. Well, no, that's not true. I'm not that special, right? Nobody's that special where, you're not going to get an illness or you're not going to die. You know what I mean? Like, so yeah, life just isn't that long. That's the thing that I took out of her quote is if you want something, like you said, find out what you want. And that's a hard question to answer sometimes, but if you don't answer it, you're never going to step forward.
So the last couple of episodes I've had with Adrian, my daughter, we've gone into the discussion of paradigms, and paradigms being that shield, basically, right? That software program that's basically directing our life. So you brought up the word, the fear and the anxiety as far as not necessarily wanting to step out into a little bit more of an uncomfort zone or stepping through the comfort zone, and understanding or even realizing where is that coming from, and not allowing yourself to be confident in who you are. Once again, that was even mentioned in that quote as well. Being confident in who you are and stepping into the things that are going on around you that you really desire, that you truly want. That's been a difficult thing for myself. So once again, it's that paradigm that's been built up over the years that if you're not in the driver's seat, if you're not paying attention to what's going on in your surroundings, in your mindset, the things that we discussed here on the podcast, you're not going to be able to be aware of it even in the moment. And so once again, you'll get to this final destination, whatever it is, whether it's at the end of this television show is the example we're using here today, but it could be the end of your life. It could be the end of whatever moment in that phase of your life. But then when you look back and you can see that looking backwards, realizing that, man, if I would have done this, or if I would have tried that, or if I would have experimented with this, where could that have taken you? And I understand that in the moment, sometimes it's easier to say than it is to do. And once again, I understand that. But if you're listening to us today, the challenge is I want you to see those things real life as much as you possibly can. And if you can do that in real time, start thinking about what is it that's in your life right now that you can begin to change, begin to pivot, begin to step into, so that way you are creating this version of yourself that you truly want. Whether it's a relationship, there might be some things you need to eliminate. There might be some things that you need to add. There's all different kinds of things. It could be a job or a situation that's not fulfilling. And what is it that you need to do instead? It's all of those things. Just don't get to the end and look back and realize that, man, I should have gone more. I should have played all out. I should have tried a little harder. Because once again, referring it back to my parents, I know in my heart, obviously I don't have them here to ask, but I know in my heart that they wish and they would have done more. They wish they would have hugged us a little more. They wish they would have said, I love you a little bit more. So many different things. And it doesn't have to be anything big. It could be, seemingly small, just like what I said, a hug, a phone call. These days with technology, it could be a text. It can be reaching out to a friend. It can be really anything, but don't let those moments pass. That's the inspiration I want to give you here today is don't let those moments pass. If you have, when you are inspired to take action, do it. Take the time, give that person a call, reach out to that individual, tell that person you love them, tell your job to stick it because you're not going to do it anymore. I mean, there's so many different things.
Mhm.
So, anyways, yeah, I love that.
Yes, one thing that I would say to our listeners, and I'm going to pose this to you, and I can give an example myself, but think of something that you've done and you're thankful you did it. Looking backwards instead of looking back as regret, thinking, you know what, 5 years ago I made this decision, and I'm so happy that I made that decision. That can be the fuel for your next decision. Whether, like Randy said, if it's a big decision, a life changing decision, or if it's a super small decision in your mind. But what's one thing, and I'll ask you, Randy, and I'll answer it. What's one thing that you've done in your lifetime? You're like, oh man, I'm so thankful that I did that one thing looking back.
I've got it too, and there's so many I can obviously put the pieces together, right? The connect the dots.
Mhm.
Looking backwards, going back to when I made that final decision that when I was going to leave my retail position, my retail job, that certainty that I had, that salary that I had, that job that I had, that insurance that I had, all that certainty that came along with that position. When I finally got the courage enough to make the decision to leave, has led me to where I am literally today having this conversation with you, Greg. And it's led me then to have the flexibility and the ability to watch and take care of my grandson, Rowan. And I would not have or be in this position had I not had that courage back then. It was tough. I will never forget going through that process, talking it over with my wife. I had young family. There were so many things to consider. Now I went from job to job, but it was still a big transition. And then even from that Coca-Cola job that I went to, leaving that full time or leaving that, right, completely and stepping out and starting the Amazon business and everything that led into that. But all of those pieces led me into having the flexibility and the ability then to, at this stage of my life, to basically watch and take care of, the next generation of Wilsons, which is to me, it's like it's the best thing ever. So yeah, that's my answer to that question. How about for yourself?
So mine would be when I decided to lose weight. I think a lot of listeners have heard the story, but basically, as an adult, I was carrying an extra 60 pounds for most of my adult life. And I just realized, I had a couple of, or one health issue that kind of put me in the hospital. And that was luckily, it was a mild case, but it was my wake up call. And I was like, this is not who I want to be. I was unhealthy, just feeling sluggish. And I just feel like I gave up on myself. Like, this is not the best version of myself, or not even like 75% of the best version of myself, right? So that was it for me. And looking back, even with my, health decisions today with nutrition and working out, I'm not perfect. I don't have the six-pack abs or anything like that, but I haven't put that weight back on. And when I do creep up a little bit, I do think about, well, what was the hospital stay like? And I don't want to go back there. So that's one thing that I look back on and thank myself. Like, oh, thank you, Greg, for just taking the reins and doing what you need to do and having that vision. Like you said, like, what do you want? Well, I don't want to be this, right? Like, you can either kind of go towards something or you can go away from something. And I went away from being overweight. And then in the middle of that journey, it was going towards just being healthy and making healthier decisions. And that was more of, like, I guess, my identity shift of within myself, right? Which I don't know if we can talk about identity or not, but that was a huge factor for me back in, 5, 6 years ago.
So how hard was it? So the question that's coming to my mind is how hard was it then to, like you said, your identity shift? Because I think that that's a big part of my own life. And I would just, as a blanket statement for everybody else, as far as that shift, that changing of who you are, whether it's around your friends, whether it's around your family. So it's being in that comfort zone, basically living on autopilot, and then having that disruptive moment, like you said, with your health was definitely one. I talked about, I created the disruption as far as with my job, but even having losing my parents and making that having that being hyper aware within me, right? To be more aware of what's going on in my surroundings. How hard is that, or how hard was that for you to change that identity shift, knowing that you were going to basically become a brand new person? Was that difficult for you?
Yeah, it still is difficult, to be honest. Yeah, it was really hard because I think, I could probably say I was addicted to food, or probably still am addicted to food on some level, just not as severe as I was 5 or 6 years ago, or most of my adult life, where, like we talked about, like death happens to other people. And when I was overweight in my 20s and even in my 30s, it wasn't that big of an issue, because I wasn't facing any illnesses or have any situations arise until that one hospital visit. And that was my wake up call. And I really just, I guess I was being selfish in a good way, but I was just like, you know what? No one's going to stop me from doing this. I don't care what my friends say, family, because I mean, they're not going to argue with, oh, you want to eat healthier and you want to lose weight and you want to, live longer and live a better life. It's not like I chose to go the other way, which would be obviously detrimental. That's a different story. But I did have friends who, I ate fast food with, and that was kind of our bond, our way of bonding or hanging out or watching football on Sundays, and you order pizza and wings. That wasn't me anymore. So it was really, it was tough at times to really like stand by myself and just be like, yeah, it's cool. If you guys want to do that, order me this instead, and really stick to my identity. And I realized for myself, and this is different probably for everybody, but some people can pull the trigger and go 100%. Some people can go 90% and have those cheat meals or whatever you want to call it. You have to really find out what is good for you. And I'm just using health and nutrition as an example, but whatever that is for you, for the identity that you want to step into, and what percentage and how you want to run that, it's all in your head, and it's all up to you, and be selfish.
I love how you said you didn't say this specifically, but this the visual I had in my mind is like you drew that line in the sand. It's like you
Hmm.
weren't going to go back to that prior version of yourself, which kind of correlates to the conversation we had on the last episode talking about sports. The guys and gals that can get it done, it's like they make a they decide. It's just a decision that they're
Yep.
going to win. They're going to move forward. Yes, they're going to fail at times. Like you said, none of us are perfect. You're still going to slip up every now and then. But at the end of the day, when push comes to shove, you're going to move forward towards this different version of yourself. I love how you said that because to me, those two correlate very closely together as far as that decision. And it's hard because you're going to have to sacrifice that prior version of yourself. You might have to lose and change some friends. You need to different routines need to be set in place. You're going to become aware of different emotions and different things a little bit more so than you were before when you're living your life on autopilot. There's going to be a lot of change that comes along with making the decision that you're going to actively be a participant in your life versus just being on autopilot and just kind of flowing at the sea, right? Just getting bounced around with the waves. And you're actually gonna, take hold of that ship with the rudder and like direct it to wherever it is that you want to go and understand that you are gonna make some mess ups, right? You're gonna mess up some every now and then, but at the same time, you've got your direction, you've got your heading as far as where you are headed, and you're just going to step into being the best version of yourself. And I think that at the end of the day, and I'm speaking for myself with this part, that when I look back, if I am in control as much as I possibly can, I won't have as much regret on my last day. If
Hmm.
today's it, I will look back and just understand that I'm doing the best that I possibly can. I'm going to go out. Rowan's in the other room right now. I'm going to go give him a hug and tell him I love him. Same thing with you and loving yourself. I love even that was part of the quote as well, as far as loving yourself and doing the best you can with that. Yeah, it's so important. And that's part of that piece of getting to the end and realizing that we're just doing the best we can. But be an active participant. I love how you said that. You just drew the line in your sand and you're not going to go back to that version of yourself and stay in that, I don't want to say negativity, but definitely maybe not going down the right path as far as for where yourself was in that moment for sure.
Yeah, and I think one thing that we can, like, kind of like an exercise or a question that our listeners can ask themselves is, what do you want to be grateful for looking back in 5 years? Right? Like for me, it was, 5 years later after I lost the weight, I'm so grateful and thankful that I just had the fortitude and just the determination to actually do it, because it's not like all of a sudden I just gained 60 pounds. I knew I was overweight. I knew what I needed to do. I just, like you said, I didn't decide to change. And I knew I needed to change. I knew it would benefit me, in every way possible. But that would be a question that I would ask, you and our listeners, is looking back 5 years from now. what can you do now that you're like, oh, I'm so grateful I took that one step?
So that brings up a thought in my mind as far as something from Bob Proctor that he taught me. It was a phrase or a sentence that I say to myself a lot, and I'll share that with you here in just a second. But the idea comes to my mind as far as like future casting. You're trying to put yourself in this future version of yourself, even in the moment where you might not exactly know exactly how you're going to get there. And that sentence or that phrase was, I am so happy and grateful now that. And then you
Nice.
finish that sentence with whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish, whether it's better health, more wealth, more better relationships, and it can be all the above. It doesn't necessarily even have to be one or the other. But I am so happy and grateful now that, and
Hmm.
just repeat that to yourself. So I'm very much a proponent for your I am statements. You need to be thinking how do you think to yourself a lot. And if you can control that a lot with your I am statements. And so this one little sentence, I am so happy and grateful now that, and just finish that sentence and just keep repeating that to yourself over and over and over. So number one, it's going to bring gratitude into that. It's an I am statement that's going to bring you into being centered, right? Centered in the moment. You're going to, lose a lot of the distractions that are going on in your mind. But then it's also going to cast that vision of that future self, of who you're trying to become, of who you're going to try to step into. And if you repeat it to yourself over and over and over, almost like a mantra, it's going to be more aware that when you're, caught up in the distractions, or when you're tempted to do whatever, a bad habit maybe that you're trying to break, it's going to allow you then to step into understanding that in that moment you can be grateful that you're going to be stepping into that better version or different version of yourself, and understand that, yeah, there might be some growing pains in that. There's going to be maybe some anxiety with that, but at the same time you're going to step into it, and it can be it can be a lot better than where you are in this moment, for sure. So that was something that came as you were just even describing that. So Bob Proctor is fantastic as well. I talk about all the greats. These guys have done so much for me, and yeah, hopefully maybe somebody will catch that and run with it and change their life. You never know.
Yeah, that's a great quote. Sounds like it's a great way to start a journal, right? I'm so happy and grateful now that, and then you can list out a few things. What do you think of? I just wrote that down, but what do you think of another journal prompt? It would be, I'll be so grateful when dot dot dot, and then not necessarily focus on the outcomes, but focus on the inputs of I'll be so grateful when I start working out every day so that I'll lose weight or so that I'll feel more confident. What are your thoughts on that kind of as a journal prompt?
So the things that come into my mind is that I would try to make it more present tense.
Okay.
when you when I'm hearing you say that, it almost feels like
You're
you're not
pushing it
grateful
out.
today.
Right.
Yeah, you're not grateful. You will be grateful in the future.
Right. Okay. That's a good
So
point.
in my so I in my journal prompts, I just at the very top, and this is all I say. Today I am grateful for, and then I just dot 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 is what I do. And I list 5 things I'm grateful for. And it can be the smallest things. It doesn't have to necessarily be anything huge. It can be sleeping well. It can be your eyesight. It can be your 5 senses. It can be the weather outside. It can be, what I mean? It can be anything. But yes, that's what I start my journal prompt with. But yeah, to answer your question, that would be the only feedback I would give on what you said, is that it sounds like that's more of a future gratefulness versus a present gratefulness. And that's the only feedback I would give on that.
Cool. No, that makes sense. And it's funny, kind of going back to my college days. One of my buddies, obviously in college, we were hanging out with friends and chasing girls and women and all that kind of stuff. And every time he would see a pretty girl, he would say, "I love my eyesight." And I started laughing because I was like, that is like, he wasn't saying it for like gratitude. He was saying, wow, look at that pretty girl. But at the same time, he was
That's
appreciating the
funny.
fact that he can see and appreciate how, pretty that girl was. Right. So it was,
That's
yeah, that's
that's
something that
awesome.
always kind of stuck with me. One of my buddies of mine. So it's pretty funny.
Yeah. So whether you're still in contact with him or not, yeah, you should mention that to him, because you're right. That's gratitude, right?
Yeah.
Being grateful for that. So once again, it doesn't have to be anything large. It can be the smallest things in the world, but you just need to be grateful for what you have today as you step into this different version of yourself. And as you continue to do that moving forward, I believe, because this is what I feel like for myself, that you're going to have a little bit less regret looking backwards, because you're going to be grateful for what you have today. It's having this conversation here with you today, Greg. I'm super grateful for that. And that was actually part of one of my prompts today was I was grateful that we're going to be able to jump on and record and have some episodes recorded here today. I just love the process of doing this. And that was one of the things I wrote down that I was grateful for today. But it can be anything. Right now, the weather outside here in Indiana it's actually really nice. It's been really nice over the last month or two, which is not normal for this time of year. So it's just recognizing those things and understanding that being present in the moment with who you are in that moment, but then future casting this bigger, better version of yourself that you're trying to become, but being grateful for number one, for where you are today, but also you can be grateful for that, where, how you're going to feel in the future. So it's like that with your weight loss, Greg. You might not have known where you were taking yourself with those thoughts and with those that line in the sand and stepping into that version of yourself. But now that you've gotten there, you can look back and be grateful for all the different steps, all the bumps and bruises, and the different things that it took to become this version of yourself, and realize that, once again, you drew that line in your sand and you're not going to go back, at least not consistently, right? Like you said, you might fumble every now and then, which we all do, but you've made the decision and you're going to keep stepping into that every single day. So once again, that's going to eliminate a lot of that regret moving forward.
Yeah, and then speaking on that, I would just tell our listeners to, like you said, make a decision and go, because you can go further than you think. And even with me with my weight loss, I think I started at 215 and for some reason I had like 185 in my mind because I think that was like my post-college weight or something. It was in my mind. And all of a sudden I was down to 180 and I was like 175 and I was like, "Oh, this is there's more to do." So I even limited my own upside saying, "Oh, 185, that should be fine, right?" But then no, I just kept on going and going. So decide and go. It's not going to be perfect, but you can definitely achieve it and you can go further than you think once you get the train rolling.
Love that, man. Love it. So, folks, just listening to us today, begin with a grateful exercise. Start a grateful exercise for yourself. It could be something you're writing down, but just definitely throughout the day. It's like you said with your friend as far as his eyesight. Just be recognizing yourself as far as being grateful for the different things that you've got going on in your life. You can't expect better things to keep showing up if you're not grateful for what you have today. Now, understand each one of our situations might be different. We might be going through some hard challenges in our life, and I'm not discounting that at all. But at the same time, there's different basic things that are going on in our lives every single day that if you can begin looking at those and being grateful for them, more better things or more good things are going to continue to show up. That's been my experience. That was something that was taught to me by the greats, the Bob Proctors, the Earl Nightingales, the Jim Rohns. And I didn't really understand that a long time ago either as I was beginning my journey. But as I've made it more of a practice, things continue to keep showing up. And so once they continue to show up and they seem to be better and better and better, makes me want to continue to do them over and over and over, knowing that it's going to keep, snowballing and becoming even better. It's just an amazing thing. And that's what I wish and hope for everyone listening to us here today. So Greg, is there any final thoughts? I love that, how you brought this idea as far as the regret piece there. Again, it's more of a negative thing, I think, when you talk about or think about regret. But at the same time, if you can be proactive in your life, get in the driver's seat, think through this bigger, better version of yourself, being grateful every single day for what you have, I think that you can get towards whatever this destination is and have less regret. And I guess that's really what I want folks to kind of take away from this episode today.
Yeah, like you said, I mean, regret can be a positive thing or a negative thing, right? Depends on how you frame it and how you spin it. So usually it's a negative frame, but like you said, if you kind of flip it on its head, do some of the exercises, watch that episode of The Office, it's a great episode, and just kind of reflect on how it, influences and impacts your life. I mean, that's all we can do, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, folks, as always, focus on being great. Go out there as soon as we get off this episode. Look around your surroundings, wherever you're at. You can be in your car, you can be in your home, you can be at work. I don't know, it doesn't really matter where you're at, but think through, come up with 5 different things right now that you're grateful for. And it can be the simplest things, but try to get yourself in the habit of doing that more often. Just catch yourself in the moments. You might be having a frustration moment, right? You might be at work, or you might be having a challenge with an individual in your life. Get yourself in the habit of then bringing yourself back into center with your I am statements, but then being grateful for the things that are going on around you. And I promise you that if you do that more consistently, you're going to start seeing better things. You're going to let the negative dissipate, and you're going to start bringing in more positivity in your life. That's been my experience, and I think that'll work for you as well. So find 5 things as soon as we jump off this episode here today that you're grateful for. Either write them down, but definitely make sure you repeat them to yourself and think about them and be really grateful for them showing up in your life here today. So we appreciate your time and attention. Go out there, focus on being great. If you wouldn't mind sharing this episode with your family and friends, we'd greatly appreciate that. Head out to your podcast platform of choice and leave us a review. We'd greatly appreciate that as well. You can always reach out to us at info@richmind.co and drop us a message. Let us know what your thoughts are on the episodes that we've had here lately. Maybe there might be some topics, some different things you might want us to discuss, and definitely leave us a line on that as well. So go out there, have a fantastic day. We appreciate your time and attention, and we'll be back again very soon. Until then, folks, bye now.